transfer several different marks from our pattern to our fabric, and so that we can use these to properly align our pieces when we are sewing. So for the insets on both view A and view B, I have both my pieces now lined up with the pattern piece on top, and there's one notch. And to mark these, I'm just going to take a small notch into the fabric itself. And this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance in this pattern, so you want to make sure that you are making a notch that is, you know, definitely less than 1/2 inch, so you're not cutting into your seam allowance. And this notch, you know, just making a little snip in your fabric is probably the, you know, the easiest way to transfer these markings. And especially with a sturdy fabric like denim that I'm using that isn't going to unravel, I think it's preferable because it's the easiest. There are other ways that you can mark notches. One other way is when you are cutting out the fabric, you can cut out so that at every notch point you cut a triangle out of the fabric. And, you know, this is also perfectly acceptable. It's how some people do it. It takes a bit longer. Another thing you can do is use chalk to mark these points. So here, anywhere that I have a triangle, I can draw a line with a chalk marker, Taylor's chalk, or, you know, a washable fabric safe pen. And that's one way to transfer these marks. So you can go ahead and do that. On the back or bottom / sides of the purse, there are notches on the sides that we want to match up, as well as a notch that we want to make on the bottom and near the bottoms. And then we're also going to want to transfer this placement line for the purse handle. So to transfer that placement line, I am going to take a piece of tracing paper. This is, you know, dressmaker's tracing paper, and going to place it with the chalk or wax. They come in both. I find that the waxy ones work a lot better. The chalk ones are a lot, you know, don't transfer as well and tend to rub off a lot more quickly. But the wax can also leave visible marks and, you know, not wash out. So it's, especially if you don't have a washable fabric. Here I'm using denim, so this is totally washable, so I don't really have to worry about the wax. The waxy one, it'll wash out. If you're using a fabric that is not washable, I would perhaps stick to chalk instead. But I have placed it with the, you know, waxy side down, touching my fabric. And here need to roll with my tracing wheel. I'm going to roll over the placement lines that I want to transfer. And you can see that what is left behind is that chalk. You know, a little bit of that chalk is transferred. Sometimes it can be pretty faint, so if it's hard to see, you know, I can see it. I don't know how well it's transferring, how well you can see it in the video. So right after doing it, I may go back over and immediately draw over it with a more visible chalk, or pen, something that's easier to see, because, you know, this will be handled a bit. So I've gone over and immediately traced over with a more visible chalk. So that is another way to do it. So you need to transfer markings and the pocket placement line on the bottom / sides. And then finally, for our front and back, there are also notches that we want to transfer onto each of our front and backs. So notches on the side. Here, I'm just gonna, again, make little snips because I think that's the easiest way for me. Marks on the notches to match on the bottom. And then for the front of your purse, if you're using insets, which is view A or B, if you don't want to use insets, you don't have to. But if you are using insets, what we need to do is to cut this portion out of only the front. So I'm working on a single layer of fabric because the back doesn't have insets, it's plain. There's a couple ways to do this. One is to use your wax or chalk dressmaker's tracing paper, just like I just showed you on the pocket placement line, and you can go over this line with my tracing wheel. And so I can see, the line left behind. I can use that and cut on that to cut both out. The other thing you can do is, if this is a piece that since this is a PDF that you have, or even something that you have traced, however it is, you can actually go ahead. So what I do, go ahead and just cut this right along this line and just cut it out of the pattern. I find this a lot easier than tracing and transferring and less likely to make mistakes. So here I have cut this inset out, and the next time that I want to cut this pattern, I can just tape this right back in. And so that's sort of my cheater way of getting these pieces out. As soon as you cut these pieces out of the front, get rid of them, because you don't want to confuse them with the insets that you'll be sewing in, because they are very similar in shape and size, but they are not large enough to sew back in. So get rid of this immediately so that you don't get confused when you're working on it later on. So I'm going to go ahead and make this cut. You can see you don't actually even have to cut it out of both sides because this is symmetrical. After I've cut this for the first time, I can go ahead and use it to make this cut. You probably want to pin your pattern in place when you're doing this. I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I've gone ahead and cut those both out. So have those cut out of the front. Again, only the front, not the lining, not the back. So those are all the marks that we need to make on our outer fabric pieces. There's a couple additional marks that we want to make on our lining pieces. So you want to mark the same notches on the side / bottom of the lining. And again, you can do that with chalk, or you can do that just by making little snips. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on my lining piece so that I have it all matched up. And you don't have to worry about the strap placement for the lining, because you're not sewing straps into the lining, only on the outside. And for the lining front back of the lining, again, here we have our pattern. Going to transfer the notches, and the other thing that we need to transfer in this case is all of the pocket placement guidelines. And so I can do this. Here I'm going to use a darker color of the dressmaker's tracing paper. I'm not going to be able to see the yellow on this yellow fabric probably, so I'm going to go ahead and put red tracing paper down instead. And line up my pattern. And you only need to do this on one side because you're only inserting these pockets on one side. But I want to go ahead and transfer here the outer large pocket placement line. You can see if you do cut this inset out, you are actually cutting off the corner of your of this marking line. So you either want to, you know, tape that piece back in before you go ahead, or, you know, just let yourself continue those straight lines. So I'm going ahead and doing that with my outer pockets placement lines and my inner pocket placement lines all the way around. The final markings that you want to transfer are on the small pocket. We need to transfer these small pocket stitch lines, and that's just 2 lines of stitching we're going to put on the finished pocket. They're optional, so you can leave it off, but I like to put them in there because they hold, you know, once we stitch these onto the pocket, it's an easy place to slip, you know, a pen or a pencil into the finished pocket so it stays in place. So that's the last marking that we need to transfer. And, you know, as before, it can sometimes be a little bit hard to see. You may not see it well in the video, but fortunately I can see it by sticking my face in there. So I just go back over that marking line that we just made with another kind of chalk so that it is more easily seen for later stitching. So now we're done with our chalk marking.